Party with your host, Dustin Rybka.
Hello and welcome to Sex Party. I'm your host, Dustin Rybka. With me on the show this week is Freya Graf. She is a therapist and intimacy coach. She's a podcast host. She is doing a ton of amazing work. You guys are going to love. There's so much value in this episode. I think you guys are all going to just totally freak out. Sexual confidence, right? How much of a role does that play in your relationship, in casual sex, in the amount of pleasure in the actual hookup, keeping a sense of humor during sex? We go into it deep. It's a huge issue. It's bigger than you guys would imagine. We touch on that. Yoni, what's a yoni? What's her definition, her own personal definition of yoni? It may be different than the other people that have been on the show. Yoni mapping, yoni massage, and the dark side of the more spiritual, tantric, wellness world. If it sounds like a lot, it is. You guys are going to totally love it. You're going to be incredibly surprised at this episode. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Freya Graf.
This week's conversation.
Freya Graf, welcome to Sex Party. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I think at this point in the very beginning of the show, everyone's wondering, what's this clown up to now? What am I in store for? I know a little bit about who you are. They don't, which is the magic of podcasting from the past into the future. Because now in the future, I know more about you, and now I've confused everyone, which is great. So for the people who are just like tuning in, they don't know what's going on. They want to be taken on the journey, right? Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, right. All right. Well, I'm Freya. I'm a holistic sex educator and a Yoni Mapping Therapist. I live in Melbourne, Australia, if you can't tell from the accent. And basically, I work with people on their sex lives and their intimacy. So Yoni Mapping Therapy, for those that don't know, is quite a niche modality that involves sex education and coaching, talk therapy, and then body work, including internal pelvic release work and vaginal massage. So that's quite a unique modality, and I do that with people with vulvas and vaginas, and then I also do online sex coaching, and have my own podcast as well called the Labia Lounge. So basically, Sex Party is very on brand for me because that is my jam.
Yeah, no, that's great, and I love the name, the Labia Lounge. That's it sounds like, well, you could go two ways with that name. You could go Vegas strip club, or you could go like you said, like Yoni massage, and I think that's perfect. I mean, Sex Party, it's just like, you asshole. Like, you know what I mean? Like, usually people are like, stick to, whenever I comment on anything that's not sex, the first comment is like, stick to Sex Party, bro. It actually happened this morning. And I'm usually
God.
Great. So it's nice to have someone on the podcast that has a fun, wild name too. It's tongue in cheek, guys. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't care what, I mean, yeah.
I think you've got to approach this stuff with like a sense of humor, honestly. It makes it so much more accessible and approachable for people, and sex is already so stigmatized and taboo and kind of hush-hush. So I think just being really in your face and tongue-in-cheek about it is a great approach. That's my approach anyway.
Obviously, yeah, live from the Labia Lounge. But I think that's awesome. And I think that like even having sex, you have to approach it with like, the best way to approach it is just to like not take yourself so seriously. And I think that's really difficult for people. And for me, it was for a long time because I was just trying to be like this Greek god of fuckery and like fuckboyness and all stuff in my past. And it was like, I think when having sex, it's you gotta laugh, like if somebody queefs, if somebody like, does some fucking weird stomach thing, noises happen, like you have to like roll with the punches. And I think a lot of people can't, right? And we talked a moment before we started recording about the difference between Australia and America in terms of acceptance and
Mm.
sex culture and sex positivity. But like, I don't know, take a minute and talk about the importance of like actually the act of sex and just not being so serious.
Yeah, I think a sense of humor is so important because, yeah, bodies are funny and they do funny things. And there is always, I guess, an element um, of, I wouldn't say like toilet humor, but in that category, it's like all of, like farts happen, queefs happen. If you're doing butt stuff, then there could be some poo
Mm,
involved. Like
sure.
sex is involving a whole lot of quite messy kind of, or potentially messy bodily functions and body parts. And so, and it's also just like this kind of dance that no one really knows exactly what they're doing at all times. And you're trying to, learn as you go about yourself, about the other person, and how your bodies kind of work together. And so, as with anything like that, like if you're learning like the salsa with a partner,
Mhm.
you're going to fuck up, you're going to stumble, you might like accidentally have a little trip or a fall, and you laugh about it and it's playful. And I think that sense of play and not being too sort of serious about it is essential to having an enjoyable sexual experience, and like really really bonding in the moment, as opposed to like being mortified if something, if God forbid your body does something perfectly natural, but I don't know, harshes the vibe or something, because none of us can handle a little bit of toilet humor.
Yeah, I mean, beautifully said. And I like really appreciate that because you sort of encapsulated that entire thing. And you're right, like it is like, but the problem though, right? I think is, well, one of the problems is that I think, you had the salsa dancing reference. I think the problem is like some someone might play it off like, let's take the salsa dancing thing, like Tim and Gina, right? The Tim and Gina are salsa dancing and Tim fucks up. There's no two ways about it. He fucks up. He like misses a step and almost trips. And in the moment he's like, ha, ha, my bad. But and then he goes home and he's like, God damn it, I fucked up that step with Gina. And he beats himself up about it,
Mm.
which does nothing for his confidence and nothing for his libido, right? Or other way around, maybe Gina fucks up, right? And she's like, Tim or you, what did I say his name was? Tim? I don't know, whatever I said. Uh Jesus.
I remember.
Yeah. But my point
Roll
is
with it.
that it kills everything after the fact, right? And we're talking about something where you do need a level of confidence, right? I mean, we're talking about like you if you want someone to fuck you in the ass, you got to have a little confidence, right? Both partners. And you got to have a little sense of humor. You're absolutely correct. You want to come on someone's face, you want to squirt in someone's eyeballs, right? You have to have a little confidence, right? And that's hard to do when you're beating yourself up about it. So are you finding that a lot of people are coming to you with a lack of sexual confidence because they've beat themselves up?
Yeah, 100%. Like we have this tendency to overthink and overanalyze, to kind of self-doubt and self-shame, to be self-deprecating, to be a little bit harsher on ourselves than we would other people. And so often we hold ourselves to these really high standards, and we think back on moments in an experience with like horror and shame and embarrassment, when we really don't need to. And a lot of that comes from just like the kind of murky I guess social and cultural climate around sexuality and around genitals and around bodies. Like there's so much stigma and taboo and shame. And we've kind of been groomed from the moment we come out of the womb to feel self-conscious, to feel like we're not enough, to feel like we're doing it wrong, because if we're sort of kept in this place of disempowerment, and we're feeling like our bodies are disgusting and repulsive, and we're feeling as though we need, you know whether it's products or courses or books or whatever, we're kind of made to feel like we're wrong and our bodies are broken and gross. And so we need to fix that, whether it be with a surgery or a training or a sex toy or whatever. So Yeah, I think we're really up against a lot when it comes to like the psychological kind of side of things. And I think that's where sex needs to come out of the shadows and be just so much more normalized in terms of just talking about it. So the
Hmm.
communication piece would probably alleviate so much of that like post sex shame and those like reflections around like I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't even call it a fuck up. Like most of the time, it's like
Sure.
we think we're fucked up or whatever. But honestly, it's just so normal, and we're human. And if we talked about it in the moment, and we had a little laugh, or we like communicated afterwards, and we had some aftercare post sex, and if everyone had a little bit more, I guess, like emotional maturity and like awareness and communication skills, I think
Sure.
we'd be in such a better boat with it all. But yeah, I work with people on confidence a lot, and it could be from body image issues and self-consciousness around that to like performance anxiety
Mm.
to communication anxiety because they don't know how to communicate their needs or their desires. Sexual shame, lots of I guess guilt and shame that can come from religious conditioning. There's all sorts. It's an absolute shit show out there. So everyone's got something around sex that
Yeah, no, it
they
is a
want to
shit
work
show
on.
out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and I'm not going to put words in your mouth because I would never do that. But it sounds like the the conversation at this point. What dawns on me is like, oh wow, all 95% of problems with sex are psychological. I mean, in a way, right? Which is sort of
Yeah.
profound, right? So, I mean, and I think I'm thinking back to some of my experiences just grazing over the few. And like I think most of my well, it depends. But like I think most of the stuff I mean, there's been some weird things that have happened during one night stands, right? Or like a casual partner versus I mean,
Mm.
there's a whole other field of problems with relationships. But I think if somebody doesn't have a good time in a casual experience, then they're less likely to do casual experiences. And then if they have not a great time in the relationship field, same, right? But then you get sort of crossover. So these people are coming to you and they're like with whatever issues, right? But what's the first step, right? Like how would you advise someone who walks into your labia lounge and I couldn't resist and is like, hey, like I need I don't know what's wrong with me. I feel like that's like the first thing everyone blame. It's like this internal like I suck kind of thing. Like what do you just
Mm.
sort of intake and listen, or is it hey, take a deep breath and like what's the first step?
Well, it depends what people are coming for because there's such a range of things, and it's different with men and women. Like often men will have something that's presenting in quite a physical or mechanical
Mm-hmm.
way, like erectile dysfunction or premature ejaculation or a porn addiction or something like this. Women
Mm-hmm.
might have like difficulty orgasming with a partner, difficulty orgasming full stop. Maybe they're reliant on a vibrator. Maybe they have a lot of pain during sex. So there can be these really physical presentations that drive them to seek help, but generally there's a lot of underlying psychological, emotional, energetic things going on. And often a really big piece of the puzzle that I start with for people is like, okay, like what sexual scripts or like sexual blueprints um, are being kind of followed here that aren't actually accurate and aren't based on how your body actually works, because so much of the time we're kind of, especially people with female bodies are often comparing themselves to like a male as default sexual blueprint, like all of the sex that we see in movie sex scenes or the media, porn, things like that are very
Disney,
much
yeah,
based
yeah.
around, yeah, like male pleasure and like a male sexual framework. Of arousal, so we're automatically feeling as though we're broken or something's not working right if our bodies aren't emulating that. um, and so much of the time, like, these sexual scripts and narratives that we're following and trying to live up to are super damaging. And giving my clients accurate information about how their body actually works and how they can actually expect their arousal to function and what it could respond to, that's like a big piece that they can find very liberating and actually just stop feeling like there's something wrong with them and that they're broken. And then it reframes it for them. So they're like, oh, I'm not broken. I'm actually functioning exactly how I'm designed to, but I'm trying to function in a broken system with all of these broken sexual blueprints that I'm trying to fit myself into. And so once they kind of recognize that there's nothing wrong with them and they understand how their bodies and arousal works and how they can better approach sex for more kind of mutually pleasurable outcomes, that changes everything, because so much of the time we're kind of it's just the blind leading the blind out there. Everyone's just trying to basically imitate porn or what they think they should be doing without like bare minimum communication skills and like emotional sort of safety and trust. Like in casual encounters, you can still have a casual encounter that's filled with really high level mature communication and a lot of safety and trust if you actively cultivate that, but most people aren't doing that. And so casual encounters don't have the emotional safety or tenderness or trust built in order for it to be a super pleasurable, exciting, yummy experience for people. And then if something does quote unquote go wrong, or like if something happens, it's a bit like out of the ordinary or uncomfortable, and they don't have the safety and the communication piece in place, then it can be quite damaging and traumatizing. And then it's not enjoyable for anyone. So like, I think so many people are undervaluing how important communication and emotional maturity and like at least having some rapport built with someone is, because sex is a big deal. Like I'm not against casual sex. It can be done well, but like it's a big fucking deal to be that intimate and vulnerable with someone. And a lot of people don't have the maturity or communication skills to be doing that in a healthy way, but we're all just out here doing it anyway because it's been normalized.
Well, I think I love what you said. I mean, I love all of it. And what a gorgeous like way of saying everything that you have. And so I'm glad that you're here. Cause like, I mean, you're clearly really passionate and really intelligent in the right field. So I really love that. I'm so lucky to have like the best fucking guests from every corner of sex on the show. And so I feel like really, really fortunate. But, you did just say, casual sex is a big fucking deal, right? And so I want to zone in on that for a moment because, for long periods of my time or my life, like I was very promiscuous. I was safe, but I was sleeping with a lot of different partners, and I was pretty direct and open. Should I be asked, right? I'm sure that I like bended and contorted and whatever. Lying is not my favorite thing to do, but I was, running nightclubs in my 20s, and I'm sure I left a couple pieces out. All that to be said, I do remember thinking every time I was with a partner, hey, you can be your dominant and aggressive sexual self, but you should also make sure that this person who's in your graces for this time, for whatever short or long it is, make them feel very welcome and like very happy to be there, comfortable, right? Consent is a thing, all of the things. And I think that is such a loaded idea, right? And maybe people get nervous or they think they have to like be a dick to the woman, or maybe the woman needs to like insult the man to like for whatever reason. Like, so when you say casual sex is a big deal, I think that there's a lot in what I just said, because you're absolutely right. Because had I not done that, right, had I just been like, wham bam, like get the fuck out, you don't get to take a bottle of water with you, right? Like it would have been a whole different thing. So I guess what I'm asking is, what could we say on this podcast, like to those people who want to have casual sex here and there in between relationships, maybe they want to live that life, do that thing, whatever. How do they do that and take that partner in for that time and make them feel welcome and comfortable? I mean, do they put a clown nose on to like break the fucking silence and like put it back in their pocket? Because people have these like built-in things. And I can remember being like, you know, I've had my experiences too, where I've like gone to like a stranger's apartment and, you know, maybe we're like hooking up or something. And like, I'm not as hard as I normally am. Maybe I had too much whiskey. Maybe I'm fucking in my head. Right. And they like make some shitty comment, you know, and that sucks. And on the other side, I mean, dudes make shitty comments all the time. So like, what would the advice be to do this hard casual sex thing the right way?
Well, I guess if you just think about it for a second, like it's such an intimate and vulnerable thing to be doing. If you strip away the fact that it's, you know, been kind of glorified and normalized as this really empowering thing to go out and get it, it's like that's cool and you can approach it that way, but also keeping in mind that like it's a big thing to share with someone. It's also an area that's so shrouded in shame and potential trauma for people. It's very, very vulnerable in terms of like people's relationships with, you know, how they feel about their body, how they feel about their sexual identity and expression. People are very, very self conscious about this. You know, men, their egos are really attached to their ability to, like, quote unquote, perform and their erection and how big their penis is or how, you know, long they can last. There's a lot of things that we've been kind of programmed to feel very, very like self conscious about and vulnerable about. And so it's a delicate area. It's a delicate topic. We're also being naked with people. We're letting them like potentially inside our bodies. We're penetrating other people's bodies. Like it is actually a fucking big deal. And it requires a lot of like, you know, ideally a lot of trust and safety for that to be a completely like enjoyable, relaxing experience. Also, arousal requires relaxation and like parasympathetic activation for it to feel ultimately pleasurable and orgasmic. So these things are really important. And then you think about like just going into that interaction, you know, that it's quite a special, vulnerable thing to be sharing. And so, therefore, obviously, we want to leave that person better than where we found them. You know, we want to leave that interaction having not created any more harm, not created any like consent violations or micro traumas, not made any comments that might make them feel self-conscious or freak out about how they performed or how they looked or whatever. So like ultimately treating the other person like a fucking human being instead of like a sex doll or a conquest or a notch on the belt or just like a way to basically distract ourselves from our own, you know, trauma or loneliness or whatever it is. Like often we're using sex to big ourselves up and make us feel like we're king dicks or to numb ourselves and distract ourselves from our own, you know, shit. So I think like just reminding yourself going into that situation, like this is another human being with their own whole life and stuff going on. And we're about to do an incredibly intimate thing. And even if I'm not in a position where I want to like take it any further or commit or for it to be emotionally connected in any way because I just want casual sex, you know, you can still approach that with like so much kindness and respect for the other person and make it a positive experience for you both. And a big way of doing that is communicating and like actually just being really, really kind, but also upfront about what it means to you. So, like, you know, there's a framework that people can use, and a lot of people shy away from it being so formulaic and rigid, but you can use it as inspiration. And the framework before you are going to engage sexually with someone is like to have a conversation following this RBDSM. So R is like you talk about like relationship, like are you in a relationship, are you single, are you in an open kind of arrangement, whatever, just get that down pat. You might have even ascertained this information already while you're chatting. B means boundaries. So like what are your boundaries? What are the things that are really off the table that you don't like? Maybe someone will be like, yeah, I just don't want you to touch my ass, or my nipples are really sensitive, so a boundary for me is like no biting or whatever. RBD. D. What does D stand for again? Desires. So like, what are your desires for this session? Like, do you have any desires that you want to share with me? And then S is like, you talk about STIs. Do you have any like sexually transmitted things I should be aware of? When did you last get tested? Blah, blah, blah. And then M is meaning. And like, you can kind of get all of those other details in like a kind of flirty sexual way. You don't have to follow this formula exactly, but try to get this information. But then the M stands for meaning. And that's a really important one, I think, to communicate if you're going to be having casual sex, because it's sort of communicating, what does this mean for me? Does it mean that I'm open to like engaging further after this, and I wouldn't mind taking you on a date, or like I'm open to seeing you again in future? Or is it actually like, I don't want this to mean anything, and for us to have sex right now doesn't mean anything emotionally for me, and I just want to be like upfront about that. It just means that I want to connect right now, and enjoy this time with you, but I'm not looking for any kind of commitment. So just like being upfront about this stuff, and sure, people might argue that it'll harsh the vibe or whatever, but there's ways you can do it and like have like a brief conversation to get a read for where the other person's at and what this is going to mean for them if you have sex with them. So you're on the same fucking page, and you've got that respect, you've got that communication, you've built that rapport, and then they're actually going to have sex with you from an informed place.
No, I again, you just keep fucking throwing, just nailing like 3-point shots from the fucking half court over and over again. Bullseyes on the, I mean, are you a good dart player? I feel like you'd just be like not looking and just like every time, you know? So,
you're too kind. You're too kind.
Remind me not to play darts with you. Cause I have a friend like you who like will just kick my ass in darts and pretend like he's not that great. And he knows who he is. So you're a professional, clearly, and I've had a lot of sex. We'll say that. I'm not a professional, but I've had a lot of sex, right? So I
recreational.
Sure. I'm just a podcast guy, whatever, right? And that's fine. But so what I mean by that is, I think you would feel absolutely comfortable in whatever setting, being like, "Hey, what are your boundaries? Like, how far are we going? You like, are we, is it kinky? Are we doing fucking, this, that, and the other, ass, cattle prod? Like you have all the things." I would just ask straight up, like, what are your boundaries? But let's just pretend that you and I aren't as sexually experienced let's just pretend like we're a normal person. I know it's hard, but like for a second, how, like, let's try to give a real world example of how someone would work boundaries into like a first date that's going well and they know it's headed to the bedroom, right? Like, is it over the appetizer? Are we waiting till the second cocktail? Should we not be drinking? Like, how do we work the word? Like, hey, what are your boundaries? Right? Is it like, when do you have, like, for a normal person?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, and like, I haven't lost touch with how confronting and awkward this can feel to bring up these topics. But I also think it's a really good read on someone if you are feeling extra awkward about bringing it up and it's not received well. It's like, well, do you really want to be having sex with this person anyway? Like, how are you going to feel comfortable enough and safe enough with them if they're not mature enough or comfortable enough with the topic to talk about it? Like, I think if we're not able to talk about sex, we shouldn't be having it. And it's harsh, but in my eyes, pretty fucking true. But over a date, it depends. Like, if it becomes really clear that you're going to engage in sex, then for sure have a chat over dinner, and just maybe use it as like a flirty kind of way to gather information about them and prepare as like a bit of a foreplay thing. Like, oh, what kind of stuff are you into? Like, what sort of sex do you like? Is there anything you don't like? But then I think like the boundaries chat doesn't even need to come until it's like you are kind of in a setting where it's like, okay, we're definitely going to have sex. So just before we go any further, like maybe you're in the bedroom, maybe you're like starting to make out and undress or whatever, you can just be like, hey, like, is there anything you don't like? Do you have any boundaries I should be aware of? Easy, simple, one fucking sentence. And like, that is going to make them feel like, oh, wow, that's so considerate. Like, that's really nice of you to ask. They might be like, oh, actually, no, I'm not really aware. They might never have thought about it because they've never fucking been asked. But especially, I think if like you are dabbling in anything kink related or BDSM related, in terms of like power play or role play, subdom stuff, any kind of impact play, choking, anything like that that is a bit on the kinkier side. Consent is paramount. So definitely checking in about that sort of thing beforehand. And it can be as simple as like, what are your boundaries? Is there anything you don't want me to do or any part of your body that you want me to steer clear of? And like anything you like in particular, like what are you interested in exploring?
Yeah.
And you can phrase that in a way that sounds more organic to you. But another way is to like talk about what your boundaries are or what you like and don't like. And that sets the precedent. So you could even just be like, oh, hey, like, just so you know, I'm really excited to like be intimate with you. I just prefer it if, like I don't like pain, so no spanking or choking or anything like that, please. And like, I don't like doing oral until like, I get to know someone a bit better, or I don't want anyone like, don't stick a finger in my ass without fucking asking me or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can share like for you, and then that encourages them to be like, oh, okay, cool. Thanks for letting me know. Well, like, I guess for me, I prefer blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, asking what someone's boundaries are, I think, power confidence move, probably going to turn them on even more, and also make them feel like literally safer. So then they're automatically going to be turned on more. So great. But like, I'm also from Ohio. Okay. And so there's some putzes back home in Ohio that like being asked that, they'd be like, oh my God, they probably like text their friend, like, this guy just asked me what my boundaries are. He's going to whip the shit out of me, or like, that's weird, or like whatever. So do you think that, and yes, I'm serious. They're like there's very closed-minded stuff happening back in Ohio. Right. And so like, how do we tackle that? Maybe that's not a person they should be having sex with, or what?
I mean, kinda, but also like I think there's ways you can sort of like lead by example and just kind of gently lead the way so that it's a bit more accessible for them, and just be like, what, like, is there anything you don't like or you don't want me to do? I just want to make sure you feel safe. If they think that's weird and they have to kind of text their friend and be like, oh my God, like this guy's such a like, I don't know, in Australia, these sorts of people would probably be like, oh, this guy's such a pussy. Like he's like asking me these like questions about like what I like and like what my boundaries are, like what a fucking freak, and it's just so immature and so kind of ill-informed. And unfortunately, like some people are like that because they basically they don't know any better. They're following this sexual script that like the man should basically just know exactly what he's doing and like take you and throw you on the bed and do whatever he wants to you. And like there's no such thing as like having fucking autonomy or boundaries. You just want him to like basically initiate everything and lead the charge because that's what a manly man does, and you want to just surrender and be in your feminine. Like a lot of people think that is how sex should be, and they're almost like turned off by a man who's considerate and cares about your boundaries because they've been kind of like conditioned into thinking like that bad boy kind of hyper mask, I guess, like archetype is hot, and that the nice guy and the considerate guy with the good communication skills and that cares about your needs and your boundaries is like a cuck or a pussy or something. So it's just like some serious Andrew Tate fucking bullshit. And honestly, I would steer clear of having sex with those people, or I would just try to normalize it for them in a gentle way. Like, hey, I actually like, I care about whether you have a good time. So like, I'd love to know, is there anything you like? Is there anything you don't like? Give me a read on that, because why would I want to have sex with someone if it was purely for my own pleasure and I'm just taking from you? Like, let's have a conversation about like what you like. Yeah.
Yeah, or again, say like, "Hey, I just want to know because I'm getting ready to break out the gloves and the fucking chainsaw, asshole," or something. Make a joke out of it, right? Like, or whatever. Like, push back on that. I think what you said is dead on, right? And like, you can be the ravaging wolf of a man, blah 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 blah, but like, do it with consent first is what I'm saying. Like if you're gonna like that's you don't want, I mean, what the hell? Like there is this like back fucking back in the day bullshit that's still around. That's like, this dude's asking me like whatever. But I mean, like if you want everyone to feel the best they can, but I just, feel like I've come across people who've told me stuff like that. Like they've tried to be, safe and upfront or whatever, and they get like kind of like made fun. So I love that you had something to say about it, for sure.
I mean, it definitely happens. It definitely happens. And it's really sad and it's really misguided. And that's kind of a result of like what sex has come to in some mainstream contexts due to porn and a lack of education, and a lack of like empowerment. It's really sad, but I think it's so important that you lead by example. And the thing is, if someone's like going to make fun of you for trying to look out for their pleasure and their boundaries, then like they're not creating a very safe environment for you to have sex with them. So it's like, that could be a good gauge of like, is this person like on the same page? Are we, are they going to meet me like in terms of emotional maturity and communication? And like, if not, maybe I don't want to have sex with them either, because like, it's not really a safe environment for the person receiving that, like, oh, like, why are you asking me that? Like that feedback, that's a huge turn off. So I think we're just like, I mean, I'm just trying to raise the bar for like the standards with which everyone goes about this. And it's a good way to kind of weed out the wheat from the chaff as well, and to gauge whether this person's going to be enjoyable to have sex with. Because like, if you can't even have that bare minimum of like communication, then like, I don't know how that experience would be all that enjoyable, to be honest.
Right. And also fuck Andrew Tate. So there's that. Yeah.
There's that.
Want to make sure we get that little button in there. So, I mean, he's just a fucking fake person. He's not real. Everything he says is a lie. He just wants your money. He's kind of like Elon Musk. Wow. 2 for 1 there. Yeah.
Go the narcissist robots. Sociopaths taking over the world. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Moving on from that before everything starts exploding around me. I mean, I don't really care. Those guys are terrible for the world. And I hope people come for me in the comments about that. So talk to me about Yoni mapping. And what I want to do first is I want you to define in your own way what a yoni is, right? Because we've had Susan Bratton, our Lord and Savior, on the show, right? She's amazing, and she talks about it. But with every new expert and an intelligent person that comes on the show, I like them to define their terms in their way, because they can vary and all the things, right? A door can look totally different to someone, and so can a wheel and whatever. So, what is a yoni to you, first of all?
Well, I mean, that's a tricky question, because almost like the word has almost been sort of appropriated, and there's a bit of controversy around Western people even using it, and the fact that it's kind of rose to popularity in the yoni massage kind of neo-tantra scene. So I don't have like a personal relationship with the word. It's a Sanskrit word. The origins of that, it literally means all of the female reproductive organs. So the uterus, the ovaries, the vulva, the vagina, basically that's whole zone of a female body. And that's what yoni means in Sanskrit. It's a tantric term. The modality that I do is called that, but it's questionable. Like, a lot of people in my industry are like questioning whether to continue using that term. But the thing is, it's become really like it's a bit of a buzzword, and it's a bit more like popular now, with yoni massage getting a little bit more like notoriety, and so people are Googling it and searching it. So those of us with businesses where that is an offering, we can't really change the name because most people know it as yoni massage. So they're like Googling that. But the word itself, it's like, it is, I guess, a beautiful term to talk about the vulva and the vagina in like a very honoring, reverent, kind of respectful way. And I think the reason that these modalities chose that term is because, yoni massage as a practice has got its roots in like tantric kind of traditions, but also because it's the only term for that anatomy that isn't either called after, you know, a male, like some man scientist back in the day, or some word that's, you know, the etymologies around shame or dirtiness, or like all of the terms that we have in the Western world for vagina or vulva are like pretty inadequate and have kind of negative connotations, or yeah. So I think the term yoni is like pretty much the only term that I know of that's like, you know, universally known to be quite respectful and honoring of female genitalia. And that's kind of why it gets used, because it's like we're trying to remove the shame and the stigma from this part of the body. But like, I mean, for me, like I also think it's got connotations that now unfortunately make people associate like my work with some of that sort of neo tantra guru bullshit, which is very shady and very kind of power dynamic, abusey, like just
Culty.
culty. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like, oh, don't associate me with like all of those like really seedy tantric practitioners that, you know, are like basically abusing people.
Yeah, you don't want to be lumped in with like Russell Brand.
No, yeah, no. So yeah, I mean, I also like am trained in a modality which is quite similar, but a little bit more coming from like a midwife and like pelvic floor physio background, called internal pelvic release work.
Mm-hmm.
And basically it's internal yoni massage, but the name of it's just a little bit more like medical sounding, and so might hold more credibility with the mainstream audience. But then, you know, the kinds of people that are Googling yoni massage are the bulk of my kind of clients. And so it's a tricky one. It's like
Sure.
quite conflicting. I wish there was another name for it, but honestly, there just isn't a better term, you know?
Yeah, no, and that's exactly why I asked. You must be a podcast host because you know how to give these like these great answers. So yeah, but I just wanted to get that on the record in the episode. Like
Mm,
your relationship to the word, it says a lot about what you do, right? And so now I'm going to ask you, what is yoni mapping and what does that look like?
mm. So Yoni Mapping Therapy is a modality that is kind of uh, there's the name is shared by a lot of other kind of therapeutic modalities that are now popping up everywhere since it all became a bit trendy, right? The
Mm-hmm.
one that I did, Yoni Mapping Therapy, it's like registered and accredited. The training we had to do was really stringent. There's a code of ethics. It's very like regulated and legit. But there's a whole bunch of yoni mapping, yoni massage, yoni this, yoni that practitioners out there that haven't done that training, that have done a weekend workshop, or that have kind of just labeled what they do as yoni massage when they've done like a couple of tantra trainings online or some shit. So it's really tricky because like it's such an unregulated kind of field. But
Mm-hmm.
what I do is a combination of talk therapy and sex education and sex coaching. So we sit, we have a pot of tea, we have a chat. People come with anything from anorgasmia to vaginismus to sexual trauma to numbness in the body to like sexual shame and body image issues, like all number of I guess like sexual and intimacy related concerns and like relationship issues, confidence issues. And so we chat about that. I give them home play practices to do at home to kind of start to work on the things that they're presenting with that they want some support with. And then I do a full body massage to relax and honor the whole body before doing some genital work. So it involves external vulva massage, where I'm giving them a bit of a guided tour of all of their
Mm-hmm.
anatomy, and then internal pelvic release massage. So I'm releasing tension from the pelvic floor muscles and getting all of the tissues internally to start kind of relaxing and softening and speaking to one another and readjusting, because sometimes there's like chronic tension patterns. There might be some scar tissue. There might be some kind of imbalance going on after birth or an abdominal surgery or an injury, perhaps like a fall, I can work on their tailbone and all of the ligaments that kind of connect around the back to the sacrum. And so there's the physical component where I'm like actually working with the tissues of the pelvis that can help for like prenatal birth preparation, postnatal rehabilitation, any kind of pelvic floor imbalances or dysfunction or issues. And then on an emotional and energetic level, often there are releases happening. So memories that are surfacing, or sort of traumatic energy from sexual abuse when they were a child, or, just a whole bunch of kind of like sexual shame and negative feelings towards womanhood or periods or vaginas being dirty, or, everyone's got stuff around this. It's a very charged area. So generally in these sessions, because it's so gentle and honoring and it's very neutral, we're not running any sexual energy. It's not for the sake of trying to get off. And it's also not like clinical and medical. It's kind of this therapeutic middle ground that allows people the space and the safety to like let some emotions out, that have been held in the tissues for years, and to let some of the kind of stagnant energy and traumatic energy just shake out of their bodies. So often there can be tears that arise, or anger. There can be areas that are really tight and painful or numb that we can work on and bring sensation back to. Every session's very different, but basically I'm working with whatever comes up for that client and helping them reconnect with this part of their body and release any tension or emotion that's being kind of held and locked in those tissues. So that's kind of the general flow of a session. Every session looks so different depending on what they're coming to me for help with, but that's the modality that I practice. That's quite different to a lot of the yoni massage out there. There's a lot of tantric practitioners that'll be doing more like spiritual, glorified, happy endings and things like that. That it is more focused on pleasure, and sometimes can be consensual and empowering, and sometimes can be really non-consensual and disempowering. So it's the Wild West basically, and I'm always really careful about recommending practitioners with this work for people because it's super unregulated. And a lot of people, I guess men in particular, hate to say it, but a lot of the men that get into offering this work are doing it for the wrong reasons and aren't very safe people to go to with such a vulnerable and delicate thing as like your sexual trauma or your vagina. So I take it very seriously.
No, well, clearly, yeah. And I mean, it is sort of a loaded, I mean, you already said this in your own words, but it is sort of a loaded subject, because you do have, sexual trauma in sexual organs. And there is a fine line. I mean, you are like putting your hands, fingers, whatever, like inside someone, around someone, touching, whatever. And so, I mean, I'm fascinated by the line between, you said that, it's not wired. I think what we said is it's not wired. Sexual pleasure isn't wired into your version of it, but other people do opt for that. And that seems to be more like tantric or whatever. And, it also seems like you could take some, you feel, and you can push back on it. It feels like maybe you want to box a tantric practitioner in a ring a little bit, like, because I feel like there's massive pushback to tantra or tantra. I don't know. I mean, I say it tantra because somebody told me to say it that way, but whatever. But and I think that's fascinating too, to be honest, because I mean, can you say more about that line, that sort of separation between we're trying to release these horrific or, trauma infused emotions and have a release and move on with our lives, and also physically feel good, but also like there's some people out here doing that kind of, but they're also like probably going to give you an orgasm. Some are consensual, and sometimes it's I'm just assuming like, oops, I just did it. I guess that just happened. That's okay. Like that kind of a thing. So if you talk more about like that gray area.
Yeah, well, I don't think all tantric practitioners are bad or doing things like
Sure.
non-consensually or with ill intentions at all. I think it's just an area that's so rife with risk because, like we talked about, we're dealing with very, very delicate things
Hmm.
and people's innermost fears and wounds and traumas. And so often the people that come for help in this department and come for this work are already, dysregulated with quite a lot of sexual trauma, and they might not really be able to have their own back and hold firm boundaries. They might not know what they need. They might be very prone to freezing or fawning in a situation where pleasure starts entering the body and they actually don't feel very comfortable with it or safe with it, but it's easier for them to go along with it, and they go into a freeze response or a fawn response. And so from the outside, to the practitioner, it might look like they're really enjoying themselves and they're able to, enjoy an orgasm or go into that pleasure, but internally they might be processing that as a re-traumatization, or they might enjoy it in the moment, but then after the session have a shame hangover and feel really violated and confused, and then feel a lot of shame for allowing that to happen and enjoying it in the moment. But that, so it's such a complex thing. And I think it can be incredibly powerful and healing for some
Hmm.
clients to have sexual energy and erotic energy used in a session if they feel really, really, really safe and empowered, and they can, throw off any of the sort of shackles of shame or things that are inhibiting them, and they can enjoy it and feel empowered by that. Some clients might be looking for assistance learning how to orgasm. And so sessions like that can be really potent because they can learn how to orgasm with a professional in a safe space. So I
Hmm.
don't think it's like something that, I would rule out entirely. I think it's a really valuable service, also things like sexual surrogacy and whatever, and like sex work, like can be so empowering and valuable for the client. But I think in this space of tantra, neo tantra, it's so unregulated and it's so risky to take a client in off the street and not really know the level of like different sort of past experiences and trauma that they've got going on, and to try to do such an intimate kind of body of work with them. I just think it's irresponsible to be involving erotic energy or sort of like sexual pleasure just straight off the bat like that, without
Hmm.
any scaffolding in place and without necessarily much training or like trauma informed expertise from a lot of these practitioners. And yeah, the tantra world is just full of them. Like there's so many, especially like, nowadays, the amount of male like tantra guru types that are being that it's coming out that they've been, violating clients and abusing their power and things like that. It's just happening everywhere. And it's not very trauma informed to be approaching this work um, using that sexual energy lightly, I think. So for me, it's just safer to kind of steer clear of that. If I
Yeah.
were going to recommend that, I would want generally I'd want it to be a female practitioner, just because statistically it's just so much safer and more likely that they're not going to do more damage and that their heart's in the right place with this work. Because this work like yoni massage and tantra, it draws a lot of narcissists. It draws a lot of men in particular that are looking for vulnerable people who are sexually open, who are going to basically provide them access to this sort of sexual lifestyle that, yeah, I mean, it's really murky and dangerous. So I kind of tend to, it's very nuanced, and there's a lot of incredible tantric practitioners, but
Hmm.
I think it's a very risky, very full of minefields kind of
Yeah.
realm. So I try to just separate myself from that, and I generally don't recommend people go and see a tantric practitioner unless I know them personally and I know how they
Sure.
work.
Yeah. Well, you know, And again, I'm not talking shit either, but I do have to say the two people who have been on this show or program, if you're old school, you can call it a program. Both people who were in a sex cult, you know, in sex cults, the foundational basis of that sex cult was Tantra. And so, and even like Osho, like from like the Netflix documentary. So that's a big, I did buy my girlfriend one of his books on Tantra, but the man was a cult leader, and like he was very old and like having sex with hundreds of people, and the basis of that was Tantra. So really, really great point. And if you have anything to add, you know, feel free. If not, I'll hit you with another showstopper question.
Yeah, I mean, it just pricks up my alarm bells. It's like red flaggy things sort of pop up quite frequently when it comes to Tantra. Because also, like, it's what we're experiencing as Tantra is Neo Tantra, which is very much a westernized, bastardized version of ancient practices that are purely focusing on the sexual branch of Tantra. And Tantra originally, you know, is yoga, and it has 8 limbs, and like one of them is around sexual practices for incredibly advanced, you know, practitioners. And basically, like, us in the West have just like taken it and bastardized it and then appropriated it and turned it into these bite-sized workshops that people are just fucking doing willy-nilly.
Yeah.
And it's really dangerous and really irresponsible and really unethical. So even though there's a lot of gems and a lot of gold within the body of work, and, you know, people have found it really life-changing, it's kind of not worth it for me to even go there because it's so rife, and it attracts a certain kind of person who really has that predator kind of approach, and lots of narcissists, lots of sociopaths, lots of people that want to abuse power and have no consequences. Because, you know, along with that neo tantra scene and that sacred sexuality scene, there's a lot of, you know, polyamory, open relating. There's a lot of spiritual fuckboys. There's a lot of excuses for pretty poor, unaccountable behavior that's done in a like an unethical way, but that, you know, they're passing off as, oh, I'm just like so spiritual and free. And there's a lot of spiritual bypassing, a lot of like victim blaming and shaming, and people getting away with abhorrent behavior and mistreatment of other humans in a sexual capacity. So it's, you know.
No, I mean, I mean, Minefield says it all, right?
Yeah.
Like, actually, that might end up being the title of the episode, because that's like, I mean, that's a big, I mean, sex is a minefield, right? Like, love is a battlefield, whatever. But you know, like this whole thing, all of this consent, Tantra, predators, like it's all one big minefield, and you know, you're helping that. To, you know, and I can tell, like, obviously, and the audience can tell too, like your passion, your like drive towards like wanting to do, you can see it in your eyes. And no, don't go to the YouTube version of this. Please finish your listen here on Spotify or Apple, and then go give me a view on YouTube. But, you know, you can really tell in your voice that you are not afraid to push against that minefield, right? And I think that's amazing. I mean, we need more people like you in fields like this that can open the doors up so people could just feel better. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, I would love to keep you for another half hour. We're getting towards like the end of the episode. So I do want to ask you one question towards the end here, and we'll see where it goes. Because I won't leave me alone. Do you remember your first Yoni massage? Were you nervous? Did you get emotional?
As in the first one that I received?
No, well, the first one you gave to someone. I should have asked a better.
Yeah, so I learnt how to give Yoni massage in a Tantra shamanic training. So because I came at this work from that sacred sexuality, neo tantra, through that avenue. So that's kind of why I can comment on what goes on, because I sort of, you know, and I had a lot of really positive experiences, and it was life changing. But I was doing it in a practitioner training. So there was a whole room full of people. We were partnered up and we were delivering the work on a partner while it was being kind of guided by the teacher, the facilitator. So it was, within a pretty like held space. And I just remember being super, super nervous. And because I'm straightly 180. I'd never touched a vulva, like, sexually or anything. It was
Straighty 180 is a new one, by the way. I love that.
Yeah, so very straight. I hadn't explored sexually with women before, so I'd never touched a vulva, and I was like shitting bricks. I was pretty anxious, but I was like, I've got this. Like, I'll just, and I was like kind of amazed how like actually normal it felt and how empowering it was, because my sort of gift is to make people feel safe and feel comfortable with me. And so that's always my highest kind of priority. And in this workshop, the woman that I was doing the yoni massage on, she was really receptive. She felt really safe. She had a huge emotional release, a big cry. She said that her hip and knee injury from a car crash years ago that had always prevented her from sitting cross-legged on the floor and been very like painful and stiff after that massage, because you're working internally in the pelvis. There's a lot of tissues that connect to things and can actually alleviate tension patterns in the body and help with injuries. She was able to sit cross-legged. She's like, oh my God, my hip and my knee feel like they haven't in years. This is so amazing. So I got like really great feedback from it, and I felt really empowered. And I think I've definitely been emotional, like just feeling my clients' emotions, and when they're like having a massive emotional release and there's this outpouring of grief because, they're grieving a miscarriage or a dead child or husband, or maybe even just a sexual abuse that happened when they were younger. And I can really feel their like raw emotion coming up and out. And so I will, while still holding space for that, I will definitely be sort of empathetically experiencing some of that emotion and like feeling how real and massive it is. And I think, that empathy also helps me be quite an attuned facilitator of this work. So yeah, definitely sometimes feel emotional, especially when there's been really massive like traumas that have happened. I've had some clients that underwent female genital mutilation, in Africa when they're a child, and had to have surgeries to undo that. And there's things like this that are just so absolutely horrifying and huge that, like, after a session, I'll just have to have a big cry and just be like, whoa, so it's big work sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, wow, is all I have to say. I think I couldn't let the episode end without asking you that, because it just felt like something I needed to know, and I wanted to have the audience experience that too. But I mean, Freya Graf, thank you so much for being on Sex Party with me this week. A couple things. One, your Instagram is fucking awesome. You take these like fun sex things and you have humor, and it's very digestible. You've kind of found your own flow on Instagram, which I absolutely love, and it's very difficult to do. So everyone should go check out our Instagram. Two, the Labia Lounge podcast. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Where can people find you, your awesome work? Where can they find the podcast? Where can they work with you and shell out tons of money to finally feel better? You take it away.
Cool. Yeah. Shell out tons of money, gang. No, I've got a lot of free offerings, and I've got some cheap offerings. Like I'm available to work online with people. I have a really great online course for women. And also like a little mini course for men called Stud in the Sack that teaches you how to be a better lover. So there's offerings like that on my website, which is just freyagraf.com. And yeah, my Instagram, freyagraf_the Labia Lounge, is kind of where I put most of my content. I'm pretty constantly shadow banned on social media platforms. So, I've kind of like over the years started investing less and less into creating content for those platforms and focusing more on like my podcast and my YouTube. And, you can go to my blog. So basically, the Labia Lounge podcast is probably my most uncensored and authentic platform. And I share the most kind of like educational content and entertaining content and value that I can with listeners there. So yeah, just look up the Labia Lounge and hit that up, or my website, freyagraf.com, basically.
Yeah. Well, we will link it all below. It's been amazing, to be honest, to have you on the show. I would love to have you back. We'll have to set that up. Maybe like, I don't know. I'll spin some ideas once we disconnect here. But I think, I think everybody's better from this episode, and I have you to thank for that. So thank you for being on the show with me. I look forward to having you back. Yeah, I was looking forward to this one. It did not disappoint. So.
Oh, thanks so much. That's lovely. Yeah, happy to come back. If people have sex ed questions or they just want to, ask me anything, we can do a little special or something like that. But yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's been a blast.
Of course. Yeah, we'll talk soon. Big thank you to my guest, Freya Graf, for being with me on the show this week. Make sure you go check out everything she is doing on her Instagram, on her website. Go work with her, right? She will be back in the future. And if you're loving guests like her and you're loving this show, you want to keep the party going. How do you do that? Well, if you're listening to this on platforms like Apple and Spotify, you could leave a rating. You could leave a review. I would love that. But honestly, fuck it. What you want to do is you want to make sure you subscribe to the show so you never miss a brand new episode every single fucking Wednesday. And especially if you're subscribed or you think you're subscribed on Apple Podcasts, they've been doing this weird thing. They've been unsubscribing people from certain podcasts for whatever reason. So you're going to want to check. Go to Apple Podcasts, go to Sex Party with Dustin Rybka. Upper right-hand corner should be some sort of symbol. If you see a check mark, it means you're still subscribed. You're still receiving new episodes. You see a pause button or anything else, tap it. Drop-down menu will appear. Click on resume subscription, resume downloads, whatever that is. Bing, bang, boom, bop, bling. You're resubscribed. If you're watching on YouTube, I love you. I see you. I appreciate you. If you're watching on YouTube, have you ever had a sexual experience with someone and they just made a dumb fucking comment that made you feel like shit? Please share with me in the comments or DM me on Instagram. Let's talk about it, right? That shit is nonsense. If you're watching on YouTube and you want to make sure that you stay at the party, you join the party, what can you do? Well, you could like this video. You could like all the videos. Love that, right? Don't have to do that. You could engage in the comments. Love that. We'll engage back, whether it's positive or negative. But the most important thing you can do, subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new episode every single Wednesday. As always, I'm available in the DMs on Instagram, and I will see you all right back here next week.
Thanks for listening. The party continues next week. Click subscribe and let's make this a regular thing. Follow the show on Instagram and Twitter at SexPartyFM. Follow Dustin at Dustin Rybka.